Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I want to, hey everybody. Okay, it's rock and roll, everybody. This is a different type of talk because I'm not just talking about trees. They asked me to speak about everything in the landscape. Trees, shrubs, turf, vegetables, fruits. So we got a lot to cover, okay? But I just want to let everybody know that it's a pleasure to be here. And I like informal talks. And if anybody has any questions during the talk or any comments, or you want to debate a point or something, let's just go ahead and enjoy it. I want to make sure everybody has this handout. This is the guts of my talk right here. Does everybody have one of these? Good. Let's get going here. All right, why are we talking about drought? Because the last 2 years we had a historic drought, as you know, in North Dakota. And just before winter, you can look at where we were. 100% of the state was dry. 100% had a moderate drought, which would cause damage. 92% severe drought, and over half the state was in extreme drought. And this was persistent the whole year. There was no relief. It was hot and dry, and it impacted our landscapes. The good news is this is where we are now. The East was blessed with many blizzards this winter, so they're no longer dry, but half of the state is still dry. And especially in the Northwest and Southwest, it's still especially dry. And so what we've been seeing on trees, we see, when you see the leaves browning on the edges, that's the key for me when I see that. That means the leaves are being scorched. They're not getting all the water they need. And our turf, actually this is my glorious turf in my backyard. It was still a little green because I tell you, I never mow my lawn, and so it grows. When I mow my lawn, I can pretty much bale hay. But the good news about that is when you've got a tall turf, you get a deep root system. And so I had a good survival of my turf, but like if I go to a Bismarck Park, this is what you'd see, only the glorious weeds growing. But the miracle thing is that they're coming back strong, and spring is a time for optimism. I always believed the Minnesota Twins are going to win the pennant, and it's going to be a great year. It's going to be our best gardening year ever. The other thing I want to mention is, you know what? Even though the East doesn't have a drought right now, it's always dry in North Dakota. If you come, like I'm from Minnesota, it's like so lush and luxurious compared to this prairie state. If you look at it, like here in Bismarck, we get like 18 inches if we're lucky a year, and even less in the West. It's always dry here. And so with that handout I give you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the drought's over for half the state, at least temporarily. That information's useful every year. And when I look at North Dakota, I go back to the beginning days. What does a natural landscape of North Dakota look like? There you go. That's our first natural landscape. Sod houses, not too much beauty there, huh? Not too many flowers or trees. But that's the way North Dakota is natural before the irrigation started. How about this landscape design? Did you like this one? It's dry here, and so we have to take special steps to have attractive and bountiful landscapes and gardens. So I've got a series of tips to go over to help you. And again, if anybody has a question as I go through, just let me know. First tip I got is you should mulch everything. When you mulch, you decrease the water loss in the soil by half. Mulching is a wonderful thing for us in Dakota, and I really believe in using organic mulches like shredded bark, wood chips, and straw. Okay, what does mulch do? It conserves the moisture, but also a nice feature, it moderates the temperature. When you mulch, it'll keep the soil a little, in the summer, a little bit cooler. In the winter, it'll keep the soil a little bit warmer. By moderating temperatures, and again, I'm talking not just leafy trees, like for fruit crops. I always put mulch underneath like my apricot trees, because that will moderate the temperature and slow the warming, so the apricots don't bloom so fast. So the moderation of temperature makes a big difference in an extreme temperature state like North Dakota. And the other nice thing about mulch, it will break down and add nutrients to the soil. This is an example of how to mulch a small tree. And I was taught, use the lesson of 3-3-3. Has anybody ever heard that, 3-3-3? It should be 3 feet wide, at least 3 feet wide, 3 inches thick, and there should be no mulch within the 3 inches next to the trunk. Okay, so that's an easy way to remember how to mulch a young tree. Now you can mulch more. My God, this tree is so happy. It is so happy. There's no lawnmowers nearby this at all, I'll tell you that. What's the number one killer of trees in North Dakota? It's lawnmowers and weed whips, you know? Every time you start your lawnmower, every tree in your backyard just shudders in fear, because it's just helpless. It's like you being in a swimming pool and somebody releases a shark. Like you're just totally helpless. You stand there, pray you don't get attacked. Okay? This tree is so happy. This tree's not so happy. So, they didn't quite follow that. Maybe they're doing 3 feet high, not 3 inches high, it looks like. And definitely, we call this volcano mulching. And this tree is subject to trunk rot. Okay, and also this is a beautiful habitat for meadow mice or voles. So those voles are going to go right in there and just eat that bark all winter long. So don't do too much. It's just like, mulch is like candy. A little bit's good, sweet, but too much is bad for you. That tree was not so happy. This shrub is definitely not happy. It is dead. This is a burning bush that got smoked to death. It's crispy now. And why? It's got rock mulch. I'm not a fan of rock mulch from the standpoint of the plant. Right now we're in basketball, March Madness. When people use rock, I call that mulch madness. That just makes no sense. It just compacts the ground. It doesn't, it's a heat trap. Instead of moderating temperature, it increases temperature. And it also can irritate the bark of the plant. This plant is dead. And where did I see this? I saw this in Bismarck. This is where all plants go to die. This is the hell place. Gas stations. If you're planted in a gas station, like what's that religion where Hinduism, like if you live a bad life, you're gonna go back like a worm or something, you're in that reincarnation. So if you are a bad person, you might come back as a burning bush and be planted at a gas station. You will suffer and die. Okay? Don't use rock mulch if you can avoid it. Actually, it's kind of interesting. This picture is like 4 or 5 years ago when the gas price is about the same as it is now. It's kind of interesting. This wasn't yesterday. Okay, maybe not much changes. Okay, the next thing besides mulching, you got to prioritize your watering, especially in some urban environments like Bismarck. My God, the water prices in the summertime are really high. They're trying to encourage people not to water their landscapes. So you got to prioritize. So who gets the drink if we only have limited water? Your new trees and shrubs get the first drink. You spend a lot of money on this, and they're especially vulnerable to damage. Garden plants get the next drink, because garden plants are not as valuable generally, but they can also be vulnerable. The lawn, I've never watered my lawn. Lawns can go dormant. They got a survival mechanism. So you don't have to water a lawn, okay? It's not necessary. But we'll talk later how to do it if you want to. And mature trees rarely need irrigation. Once a tree is well established, it's been through this drought, it'll be through the next drought. So new trees and shrubs, yeah. A new, I was taught that when you take a tree out of a nursery and put it into your front yard, that tree will lose 95% of its feeding roots. So that is severe shock. I look at this picture, man. If there was a tree cop in town, these guys would be arrested and put in jail. This is torture to trees. There's a lesson that about for every inch of trunk diameter, there's about 1 to 1.5 years of transplanting shock. So this tree they're sticking in there, let's say it's 10 inches in diameter, that's going to have 10 to 15 years of shock. They want to have an instant landscape, but they're just totally torturing that tree. It lost over 95% of its roots from these people. Don't do that. When you water a young tree, you want to keep the soil moist, but not too wet, not soggy, and do not irrigate wet soil. Sometimes, like you spend $200 for a tree, you go, my God, you're gonna live, buddy. I'm gonna water you today, I'm gonna water you tomorrow, I'm gonna water you the next day. I'm gonna make sure you live. But actually, if the soil's wet to begin with, it doesn't want any water. And by keep watering, you're closing up those air pores. Roots gotta breathe. And so if you keep watering, you're just gonna literally drown the tree to death. So first thing you do is I tell my clients, you get out there with like some type of a prod, some type of maybe a screwdriver, a long screwdriver, and go about 6-10 inches deep and see if it's moist. If the soil is moist, that tree doesn't want any water. Only water if the soil is dry and the tree wants it. Here's a few lessons or rules of thumb. Landscape plants need about 1 inch of water per week, and for young trees, that's about 10 gallons per inch of caliper of the tree, or 5 gallons per square yard of mulch area. But again, use your common sense. And there's lots of ways to irrigate. Here in Bismarck, we see a lot of these trees with these watering bags that slowly drip out water, or you can get some 5-gallon pails and poke some holes in them, and the water will just drip in slowly. Or here's some soaker hoses. That tree's really happy, I'll tell you. So water the entire drip line, or even with evergreens, extend a little about 3 to 6 feet beyond that. Okay. Next, use plants that are made for these conditions. This is what we call xeric plants, xeriscaping. These are plants that can take drought. So these are plants that are used to conserve moisture. So all you got to do is water them like for the first year, they're established, and then they can survive the dry conditions of North Dakota. So your plant selection makes a difference. And here's a few examples of some xeric plants. Prairie coneflower, the purple coneflower, very popular. Sedum's a nice one. I like sedum because it blooms in the fall when everything else is kind of fading. And the butterflies like it in the fall too. It's a nice flower in the fall for them to get their food from. Sedum has a thick leaf. It can store water. It's sometimes called stone crop. Catmint's a good one, and so is yarrow. So pay attention to when you buy perennials, select perennials that can take dry soils. Some trees that are good for these conditions. Our state tree is wonderful, American elm. And here's our American Elm Prairie Expedition from NDSU, a beautiful tree that can take dry conditions. What a tough tree. And it tolerates Dutch elm disease. It resists it. Hackberry is a tough tree for dry conditions with that beautiful pebbled bark. I think bur oak is beautiful, especially I like those little fingertip on the ends of the branches. Look at that, so beautiful in the winter too. These are all tolerant of drought. Or a small tree that's very popular in Bismarck is a Tatarian maple, like hot wings. That's the first fall color that you see. This is a popular street tree here. There's lots of good shrubs too, like potentilla and spirea, pink spirea. These are all easy to grow shrubs that can tolerate dry conditions. Okay. Anybody have any questions, or you're just spellbound by the presentation so far, or is that it? We just got everything covered, I guess. Okay. Let's talk about managing pests in drought. Okay, whenever I manage a pest, I'm there to fight and protect my plants. I want to know the enemy. I got to identify the enemy. And then I got to understand what it can do. How serious is the enemy? Is the enemy a killer or a nuisance? Then I want to know what's the most effective weapon I have to kill it, to murder it. It's my enemy. And then I want to attack it when it's vulnerable, when it's not looking, when I can nail it. Okay, who knows what bug this is? Have you seen one before? I got about 1,000 in my basement right now because my neighbor has a row of Tatarian maples right next to me, and they all went in my basement over winter. Now they're waking up. Box elder bugs, my God, there was such a huge box elder bug explosion last year. Do you guys sense that? They were everywhere. Why? Because of the drought. We depend on spring rains to introduce diseases and flood insect eggs into pests. Box elder bugs had none of that. So, and there was drought last year and the year before. Their populations exploded. And so then I think about, okay, how serious is it? Well, how serious it is to a box elder tree. You know, hell, box elder tree is kind of like a weed almost, barely can't kill that thing. So it's just a nuisance, even to the box elder tree. You don't even know it's there. You don't see any symptoms. It just hangs out there all summer, sucking sap out of a leaf, and then when it starts getting cool, it comes your way. So they're not worth spraying or worrying about, okay? On the other hand, when you have drought, that's a stress that can cause more, that can introduce borers to a tree, like a birch tree. You know, in the old days, there was a survey that 1 out of every 3 households or front yards in the Midwest had a birch tree in front. People just loved that white bark. But then we found out that these birch trees didn't like it there. Birch trees don't like hot, sunny conditions. You know, you never, like when I drive out in the country, I never see a birch tree out in the prairie by itself, right? Never. I'll see an oak tree, but I'll never see a birch tree. It can't take the heat, okay? Birch trees are like social trees. They all like to hang out together in a cool spot. Say, okay, I'll give you some shade, will you give me some shade? And we'll all be happy, okay? But so if you put birch tree out there, it's already under stress. Now we put some drought on it, and it's crying. The borers can hear it, and the borers will attack it. So this is a tree that's under stress, and this is a killer. This is a killer. This borer is a killer. And so we have to take action. This guy's begging for a drink of imidacloprid. It needs a little systemic up there to kill his borers before it dies. Or anybody know what this pest is? It's just a tent caterpillar, right? You can tell by the tent. And we see that a lot on fruit trees in the springtime. You know, this is an interesting tree because, like, if it's a mature tree, it can tolerate it. But people always call you, oh God, my tree, what can we do? I got to do something. And they'll get out there with blow torches, or they'll cut off the whole branch. I go, God, those caterpillars are just eating leaves, and you cut off the whole branch. You know, who did more damage? You know, I always tell them, you know, you're such a good person. That tree is so lucky to have you for an owner. But my God, you're under more stress than the tree is. Just calm down. It's going to be okay. But still, people want to know how to nail it. We'll talk about it in a second. Also, grasshoppers. A lot of grasshoppers last year, because in a landscape, you water your garden. So grasshoppers get thirsty. They're going to go to your garden, munch on your tomatoes. Same like cabbage. So, you know, those cabbage moths were crazy last year, and they were munching down on a lot of cabbage. So in your landscape, you got a lot of options. And one group are natural insecticides. These natural insecticides are very safe for humans, relatively speaking, and they're effective, but they're kind of slow acting, like this BT on top. They eat the bacteria, and then they get a stomach ache, and 2 days later they die. So like, I don't know how you feel about bugs. Like, well, again, if you invade my territory, I'm gonna come after you. Maybe you like a slow torture, like 2-day torture. Maybe that makes you feel better. Or, you know, spinosad. Spinosad is the hot one now. It's very safe and causes paralysis. Sounds nice. Neem. Neem oil you spray it on your plants and it's a repellent. The bug just doesn't want to eat that leaf anymore. Also, its hormones change. So the bug it's not interested in having sex anymore. So it's another slow, torturous way to destroy a pest. It just slowly dies. Insecticidal soap, it has its limitation is you got to spray the bug. You got to spray the bug itself because it dries out the bug. And sometimes, like for trees, I'll just use a shot of water, like for mites or for aphids. Just shoot them full of water, knock them down, frustrate them. On the other hand, there's other gardeners who take what I call the Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry approach to gardening. Like, make my day, bug. You're on my cabbage or you're on my tree, you're gonna die. And we've got those chemicals too. The carbaryl and the pyrethroids. They're very toxic, very effective. A pleasure to use. You know, you can spray your cabbage plant and you can see those cabbage loopers will literally fall off the plant immediately, and you can watch them shake and shiver and go paralyzed and die in 10 seconds. It's a great feeling of revenge, if you're after. But this is a loaded weapon. It is very powerful. How about these other pests? The rabbits are also attracted to our gardens when it's droughty out there. I was taught rabbits were nice and Easter bunny and fluffy and cute. But a rabbit is really evil. They are our enemy. Don't be fooled. Will marigold stop a hungry rabbit? No way. I think the most effective solution is what we call the lead treatment. There we go. Go get it. But really the best defense against any wildlife, and there's a whole talk about it this afternoon by Joe, I encourage you to go to that, is a barrier. A physical barrier is the best way to protect your plants. Again, don't be fooled by these cute bunnies. That is like a mobster planning his next attack outside the fence, looking for that one opening to eat your lettuce. Show no mercy. Okay, now we're going to shift the lawns a little bit during droughty conditions. Mowing your lawn can make a big difference. You should mow tall, let the clippings fall. A tall turf develops a deep root system. A shallow turf, shallow root system. The first people's lawns who turn yellow in the summer are people who mow their turf low. Cut tall. Tall turf shades the soil, keeping it cool. Our turf wants it cool. Our turf, the bluegrass, is native to England. So try to make North Dakota like the British Isles if you can. Try to keep it cool. When you cut the clippings, let them fall. That's like a free fertilization every year. Those clippings have nitrogen. Clippings smother weeds, and it also saves you time and money. Use a sharp blade every year, otherwise you're going to get fraying, and that's going to be worsened under drought conditions. Okay, next tip. Rain barrels are having a revival because they maximize our use of water, our efficiency. It reduces runoff from gutters. And this is something that's really surprising to me. If we just get a 1-inch rain on an average roof, like a 1,700 square foot roof in North Dakota, that's equal to 1,000 gallons that fell. And so much of that is just wasted, through the gutter. But if we could collect that could save us a lot on our water bills. And also, it's good quality water. It's the pure water from the skies. Okay, it's not treated water. Last tip, use your water efficiently. So Like sometimes when you drive around, you see these sprinklers going, their sprinklers are going everywhere. It's like they're irrigating the road and the sidewalks, just wasting water. So move your sprinkler so that you target the plants. Avoid overhead irrigation. And I'll get to that in a second. Avoid windy days and hot afternoons and water in the morning. Avoid overhead irrigation. You're going to lose 1/4 of this water before it even hits the plants. It just evaporates out of the sky, just like that. So you just lost that. The other thing, if you could talk plant talk, I always thought this was kind of a nice thing. The plants appreciate it, like a nice shower. Like I like a nice shower, and it seems like the leaves glisten, and they're kind of happy after I shower them. But actually, if I could listen to those plants, they would be cursing at me. Say, why, Tom? Why? Why are you doing this to me? Now my leaves are wet. I'm going to get disease because of you. Thanks a lot. Don't water overhead if you can avoid it. You're wasting water, and the plants don't like it that way. They don't drink through their leaves. Instead, target your water at the base where they can use it. Again, I remember my first real job was I worked at a sunflower breeding station in Minnesota. My job was to kill sunflower plants. So what we would do is we're finding rust-resistant sunflowers. So what we would do is I'd collect rust pustules, the rust spores, and then I'd go out, then in the middle of the night, we spray the planting, and I'd go out there shooting the rust around. I was like the Grim Reaper, just trying to kill all the sunflowers. And my goal was to find one plant that didn't die, and that would be our next hybrid that we'd sell as rust resistance. So that wasn't a fun job, out there in the middle of the night spraying disease, but it was effective. So leaves wet at night lead to disease. Water in the morning if you can, because if you water in the morning, the plants will suck up everything they need, and then they'll have the whole day for the leaves to dry out before the nightfall. Okay, let's talk about watering grass. Grass needs about 1 inch per week if you want to water. Again, you should water deeply. The turf grows where the water is. If you water deep, the turf will grow deep, the roots. If you water shallowly, just like every day a little bit for 10 minutes, you're only getting the surface of the soil moist, and you're going to have a shallow root system. So it's better to water deeply twice a week or once a week than watering every day. Okay? Water deeply, not frequently. And then if the water starts running off, like if it's on a slope or something, just pause the sprinkler, have it on a timer. So, okay, we'll go for 15 minutes, then we'll shut it down for 30 minutes, then we'll do it again for 15 minutes. Okay? Avoid the runoff. If we're in a severe drought, and you can keep turf alive even when it's dormant and under severe drought just by giving it 1/3 of an inch every 3 weeks. But I have to say, it's very rare to see a lawn die from drought in North Dakota. If it's bluegrass, because the bluegrass would just shut down. It's remarkable. Like here in Bismarck, we were one of the driest places, and you saw like one of those first pictures of my lawn or the park lawn. It came back just fine after the temps cooled off in September, and we just got a little bit of rain. So, but if we got another severe drought coming this year, just give it a little drink every 3 weeks, and you're into shape. Okay, so now I think you're all prepared. We're not going to have a drought. We're not going to have a drought this year. This is what we're going to have. We're going to have lots of rainbows, lots of beauty on the prairie. But I hope you're a little bit more prepared to care for your landscape under dry times. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
What about creating thatch for mulching? Is that an issue?
Creating thatch for mulching. Okay, great question. If you mow on a regular basis, you're cutting clippings that are almost all water, just like over 3/4 water. You will not create a thatch buildup. You will create a thatch buildup if you let the turf grow tall, because then it gets more fibrous and those clippings won't break down. If you mow on a regular basis, those clippings will readily break down. People who have a thatch buildup are people who kind of like me. They wait till the turf gets a foot tall and the neighbors give me a bad look, And then, okay, I guess I got to mow. And then we bale hay in the back. Okay? So that, or people who use too many chemicals, because the chemicals will kill the microbes in the soil that naturally do the decomposing. So there's nothing bad about clippings. Clippings are beautiful. Yes, sir.
I think they're called Olo or Ala pots. Have you ever heard of anybody using like little terracotta pots that you bury in the ground and fill with water for irrigating trees in drought situations?
I never heard of that. So I am no help for you. Maybe somebody else has. Anybody know about aloe pots? It's like a terracotta pot you put in the ground.
It's just think of like a clay pot about yay big that people use them in gardens, and I'd always wondered if anybody uses them for trees. But you bury it, fill it full of water, and then the water slowly seeps out from the pot into the substance of the soil around it. And I've seen it used in irrigation in pretty dry places for gardens and flower beds and things, but I feel like if you scaled it up a little bit, it might work for trees.
Well, either you're on to something or you're on something. One of those two. I don't know. Not sure. But it kind of reminds me a little bit of a peat pot that we use, a peat pot that we use for when we plant like watermelon transplants. Because you use them instead of the normal cell packs, the plastic cell packs. Use a peat pot because the melons are very sensitive to their roots being disturbed. So you grow the plant in a peat pot, and then you just plant the peat pot in the ground along with the transplant, just like you're describing with trees. So that is done. That's done. Sure. Anybody else? Yes, sir. You know, the question has to do is about having clovers in lawns, and that is a trend now. My only experience was when I was a kid, because my mom's Irish and she liked clover in the lawn, so we didn't kill it. So that's my only personal experience. But I'll tell you, it is a trend, and it's especially a trend because, well, it looks good in the summertime, and also it's good for pollinators because the flowers are beneficial for bees. Whereas a standard turf with no flowers is worthless to a bee. I think the drawback about this clover stuff is it's not very wear tolerant. So, you know, like if you're playing football in the backyard or soccer, that could be a problem. There's concern about so many bees being attracted that if your kids are sensitive, that could be an issue. This is what I would do if I was you. We had a talk. There's a event called NDSU Spring Fever Garden Forums. And it starts Monday night. We're talking about veggies on Monday night. Spring Fever Garden Forums. Last year we had a specialist talk about clover lawns. So she has a whole 20-minute presentation. You can go to our Spring Fever website, just Google it, and look for last year's presentations. All presentations are recorded. We got a whole talk about clover lawns. You know, the other issue is how are you going to control weeds in a clover lawn? How about dandelions and clover? How are you going to kill the dandelions and not kill the clover? You know, that's kind of, I don't mind dandelions. I like flowers in my lawn. They look pretty, but some people, that's an issue for some people. But there's a great presentation on that last year. Any other questions? Okay, I think y'all want your lunch. Is that it? You got one more? Oh, that's right. One more good talk. Great. Okay, you guys. Thank you. It was a pleasure.